too. It's a great opportunity.
I think that they're appropriate, non-offensive, you know. Anyway, I just think they're very nice gift.
Any other questions from the council on this? No. Are there any questions from the public on the photos that we've moved around, or of the Arts Committee?
Is there a concern about vandalism?
Mr. Mayor, actually, this is becoming an increasing problem for cities because of metal recycling. And I know that in the Sacramento area, it is actually a big problem. And it's just one where I think we're fortunate that we have plenty of police presence, and they do tend to drive by the park a lot. But it is something that we need to think about when you site it, to where, you know, if it's lit or something, so that it can be easily seen if somebody's out there sawing off, you know, the pieces of bronze, because they're actually quite valuable these days.
And the town is insured for vandalism.
Okay, but we'd like to just protect it as opposed to collect on the insurance. Okay, so good question, though. Yeah, okay. All right, so can we have the council have a motion to accept these gifts?
So moved. Second, with much gratitude.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. Now we move to the regular portion of the agenda, which the first one is approval of the appointments to the Audit and Finance Committee, then the Parks and Rec Commission, then the Planning Commission, and the Rail Committee. Teresa, do you want to walk us through those?
Sure. You have my written report and recommendations. I think what we'll do is start with approval of appointment to the Audit Finance Committee. And the Audit Finance Committee had 3 people, but at the last month's meeting, council approved expanding it for 2 additional residents to sit on. So you have a list of 4 people. Their applications are attached. Those 4 people are Michael Lepris, Robert Roser, Bob Polito, and Diane Santu. I believe Bob Polito's in the audience, and I'm not sure that anybody else is. But you've heard from all of them when you did the committee vacancies appointments.
If any of them would like to make a comment, they're welcome to. I would think it would be appropriate.
Bob Polito's met with me a couple of times over the course of the month. Asked several questions about our finances and town operations.
And Bob also came to the most recent Finance Committee meeting.
Do we have sheets?
No, we do not.
How do we do this? Do we have slips?
Do you want to get some and we can move on to the next agenda item?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Why don't we do that? So we're going to hold off on that. And we're going to go to item number 16, which is to approve the selection of Biggs Cardoza Associates for the Marsh Road retaining wall. So that's item number 16. Mike?
Yes, Mayor, members of the City Council. The purpose of this consultant services agreement is to perform necessary structural assessments of the Marsh Road retaining wall, to develop design alternatives for necessary rehabilitation or repair of the wall, and to update and determine the hydraulic capacity of the Atherton channel. Biggs Cardoza was selected through a competitive qualifications-based proposal process. For this project, the town of Atherton received 3 proposals, and the ranking of the firms is listed in your staff report. And the ranking was done with an independent evaluation panel consisting of 3 town employees and 1 outside civil engineer. This item was originally heard by the council at your July 12th meeting, and at that time the initial scope of work and contract amount was not approved due to concerns expressed by the City Council regarding the cost for these services. So as a result of that, staff met with Biggs Cardoza and renegotiated the initial scope, which resulted in a cost reduction of approximately $14,000. The reduction in cost resulted primarily by reducing the number of design alternatives that the consultant would study for this project. The initial agreement was for a not-to-exceed fee of $92,235. The recommended agreement, which is in front of you this evening, is for a not to exceed fee of $78,102. This scope includes the development and evaluation of 3 design alternatives, which staff believes is prudent and necessary for this project. The contract, along with the scope of work and detailed work plan with estimated hours by task, is also included as part of your staff report. Please note that staff is only recommending approving phase 1, which is the preliminary engineering at this time. Phase 2, which would be the final design and construction services, will be brought back to the City Council in the future once the preferred design option has been determined. That concludes staff presentation. We do have a representative, Mr. Roy Schnabel from Biggs Cardoza, who is a principal at Biggs Cardoza, who is here this evening to answer any specific questions about their scope.
Are there questions from the council? I think Jerry was going to go, but.
So Mike, the work product will be to come up with a plan, an estimate as to what would be needed to fix any problems they find?
Yes, it would actually develop 3 different alternatives for repair and to rebuild it, which would be brought to council to get a decision.
As part of this work, they're going to be doing a survey, as I understand it, of the boundaries of between the homeowners and the town of Atherton, establishing those boundaries. Is that right?
No, the survey will be a design level survey, topographic survey necessary to do the final design for the ultimate project. However, the survey will not include actual property, the actual defining the actual property lines. That could be done. If that's the desire of council, we would just need to, that would be an additional scope.
Okay. My last question is, by going ahead and doing this work, which is necessary, I think that the condition of the road is not real good, or the condition of the edge of the channel is not real good. Could some of this work be used later on if let's just suppose that at some point in time, someone would come up with the idea that maybe by covering the channel and we could have a bike and pedestrian walkway or lane added to that road that would be providing more protection. Would some of this work be helpful for that type of project, or would that be a whole new effort?
Well, no, I mean, given that, you know, as part of the scope, the consultant will provide 3 different design alternatives. One of the alternatives could include a design which in the future could accommodate a covering that cover. And so what I was planning on doing there is that once the contract is approved, we're going to have a kickoff meeting with the consultant and then go over specifically which 3 alternatives should be considered. And then I was going to bring those 3 alternatives back to the council to make sure that the council agrees that these are the 3 different alternatives that ought to be studied. Primarily because there is a sensitivity about potential covering of the channel and expanding the roadway.
Yeah, Mike, I'm still kind of puzzled about the whole homeowner situation relative to that wall. And I'm wondering if it was decided to rebuild the wall, should the homeowners be asked to contribute some of it?
I don't believe so. I mean, the wall there is part of the ATHERTON channel, which is a major flood control facility for the town. And although there are definitely homeowners adjacent to it, it's really a facility that that serves the entire community.
Okay.
I do, but you want to go ahead? Okay, please. So thanks. Well, so the Atherton Channel is exposed, our portion, but it goes under, it continues and goes under the road when it becomes Menlo Park, or the county, right? So how do we know that the wall under the pavement where the lane expands is in good shape? I mean, does it just magically, you know, our length that's exposed is kind of crumbling, but once it goes under the pavement, will that be given any consideration?
No, that is beyond the scope of this project.
Can you see through there? Has anybody crawled under there, or?
Well, I'm assuming what that is a box culvert.
Steve raised his hand. Steve, you did?
It was rebuilt 25 years ago to the current standards. The wall that we're studying is
Has not been.
60, 70-year-old wall,
Right.
70, 80-year-old wall.
Right,
Yeah, that was all rebuilt to current
Okay.
box culvert rebar standards. It's all brand new.
yeah. So my other question was, the three alternatives, I mean, those are not described in this proposal. You're going to meet with the consultants and create three different alternatives for them to create, and then bring those back to us?
Correct. And actually, it isn't specifically stated in the scope of work, which is part of the contract, but as part of their proposal, you know, they did identify, you know, some viable options, and actually they identified probably, you know, 7 to 9, and that's why the original contract that we brought to you back in July included, I think, up to 6 different alternatives. But, you know, as I stated, you know, we went back, and because of the concern over cost, we worked to reduce that down to 3, which we still believe is enough to, you know, provide the council, you know, the different choices to make. So,
I guess I would like to see whatever we do to have enough flexibility to either keep it exposed or be able to, at some future date, make some other kind of bike or pedestrian path, if that's what, you know, the residents and the council wants. Pardon me? Are you cold? You're hot? Would you like me to open the window?
Okay, do you have any other questions?
We're having some,
Would you have any other questions?
not me, I'm fine.
Do you have any other questions?
No, I'm done.
All right. Kathy?
I think Councilmember Dobby.
Okay.
Let's not have, this is no HIPAA violations, okay? Go ahead.
The Atherton Channel's been something that I've kind of overseen since before I came on the council. And so, as I get ready to leave, I'm sort of interested in what's going to be happening to it. The outside civil engineer and the 3 representatives who ranked and reviewed these proposals, how did they determine how they were going to rank them?
well, it was done independently. We all reviewed the proposals independently, and you know, just basically based on the scope of work and approach that each one of the consultants took, and the work plan that they developed was, and also taking a look at their qualifications and experience based on previous work, similar type work that they had done.
Did the representatives from the town of Atherton, besides yourself, have any engineering experience?
The 3 representatives from the town of Atherton was myself, Steve Tyler, and David Wynn, and David is a licensed civil engineer.
Now, this is only the south side of the Atherton Channel, which is most directly affected by the traffic moving along Marsh Road, correct? Nothing will be done on the north side?
Well, no, depending on the alternative selected and the condition that the consultant will determine, it could very well be that the entire channel will be replaced and rebuilt.
But they're not going to be evaluating the north side, this says?
Well, structurally, the south side is more important because it holds up the road. So, but then as far as the 3 alternatives that are going to be studied, you know, one alternative, for instance, could be to just rebuild the, I guess that would be the north side of the channel and keep it as an open channel. Another alternative could be to put in a box culvert, which would be a U shape, which would mean you would remove the existing line channel. And another alternative could be a box channel, a box culvert channel, which would be U-shaped, but would be designed so that in the future, a cap or a top could be placed on it. So, I mean, those are examples of 3 different alternatives that could be, you know, part of the study.
And how are they going to analyze the existing stormwater runoff in order to perform the calculations of how the amount of runoff the channel must retain and the velocity? I mean, are they going to be looking at this year's runoff? Or are they going to try and determine what a 100-year event would look like? Are they going to try and determine what the average year's runoff might look like? How are they going to do this? Because it varies from year to year.
Well, I guess I will ask Roy from Biggs Cardoza to answer that. Also, Biggs Cardoza, they do have a sub for this part of the work, and that's BKF, and Ed Biscotti is their sub who will actually be doing the channel hydraulics and hydrology.
Yeah, and BKF has done the work on the upper channel extensively, and of course it varies from event to event. The horse farm on the other side of 280, when they had the first runoff, a lot of debris comes down the channel in that first event, whereas later on there's not nearly that amount of debris coming down the channel. So yes, would you explain to me how you're going to do this?
Well, as Mike said, we have a consultant that's going to provide that information. My guess is that they're going to do analysis of HEC runs and hydraulic runs with regards to what's coming out of the channel and into this channel. And so we'll be looking at a very, very small and very defined area of the hydraulics within this area. And basically it's going to be what travels through this. And based on our scope, the scope that we've whittled down to, it's basically going to make sure, what we're going to look at is to make sure that we're not adversely affecting what is the current hydraulic condition of the channel. I don't think we're tasked to try to fix some of the problems that are occurring from a hydraulic standpoint within this channel. So it'll probably be based on whatever the evaluation is for the 100-year storm.
But you are going to look at a 100-year storm, because that channel can get very high. I mean, there are times that it's almost up to the top. It's rare, but it has happened. I've seen it where it's almost like white water going down there. But it's rare, and at other times it's just, most times it's just a trickle.
But I need to say this again. We're not tasked to try to fix that. What we're trying to do is, if that's an occurrence that is historically occurring, we're trying not to make it worse with whatever fixes we provide within the channel. So if that's an occurrence now, that's not part of the scope that we're providing. We're just making sure that we're not adversely affecting. We're trying to maintain the existing flow through the channel that's currently in.
I see. And it says that when the final design for construction plans and specs shall be negotiated with Biggs Cardoza. Why wouldn't another RFP go out at that time and determine who would be doing the final parts, construction plans and specs for phase 2? Why is it saying it shall be negotiated with the same firm that did phase 1?
Well, when we put out the original RFP, it was for the complete project, to not only do the preliminary design, but also to do the final as well. During our conversations with Biggs Cardoza, and given that there are, a number of different alternatives, I think we all agreed that rather than trying to negotiate a final contract to include final design was probably premature, because depending on the design alternative, that cost could change. So both Biggs Cardoza and ourselves, we agreed it would be better to, put that off till the council decided on a final project. Now, of course, for phase 2, if the council and the town desire, there's nothing that prevents us from doing another RFP. However, as long as we feel Biggs Cardoza is performing in a very high-quality professional manner, in my mind, there's no reason to change, because at that point, you already have a firm that has done all of the surveying, that has done probably at that point a 30% design, because in order to develop cost estimates and evaluate environmental impacts and impacts to traffic during construction of this project, it's going to be about a 30+% design. And so, that's a reason why it's preferable to stay with Biggs Cardoza. But of course, there's no obligation at this point, but that would certainly be our plan at this point.
I would have thought by law we would have been required to.
No. With an RFP, remember, you have to select the most qualified firm and then negotiate price. Well, by definition, if they're most qualified now, and then they get more information as they go through this,
They're more qualified.
it would be almost unheard of to go somewhere else. But it would be possible. For instance, if they did some kind of a calculation, there was a problem, they didn't produce the things they were supposed to produce, and they were therefore, no longer the most qualified, then we would certainly move on to somebody else. But this is pretty common where you break it into phases, but if it's just the design for this project, they're going to remain the most qualified unless they do something to upset them.
But there's no reason why council couldn't go ahead
That's true.
and get an RFP for the actual construction from.
You could certainly do that for the construction design, and that would, but remember, the bottom line is you're still going to get the most qualified, and it would be hard to, it would almost have to be some kind of a problem with them going forward at this point to make them, less qualified. So, but it is certainly feasible, and it does happen once in a while.
A grant application. This is going to be a very expensive project, and while you have parcel tax funds that is the source of funding for this not to exceed $78,000, you're probably talking about millions of dollars when you're talking about box culvert potential for this stretch of property. Have we thought at all about looking into a grant potential based upon this initial work? And the multi-jurisdictional aspect of it. I mean, this channel involves, which is always a benefit when you're looking at grants, involves Menlo Park, Woodside, Atherton, and the non-incorporated area of the county. So that also has a benefit when you're looking at grants. So based upon this work, have we thought about looking into a federal grant?
I think on these large dollar projects, you're always searching for other funding sources, and that's one of the things as we progress. We will, also work with Biggs Cardoza to see, what if they're aware of, different types of grant funding that this project would be competitive for.
Is that something that makes a difference to look into now, because it would perhaps frame the scope of the work any differently?
I don't believe so. I mean, you're either talking about transportation funds or you're talking about, some flood control funds. And, this project is a combination of both.
Because it also affects so many projects that are coming down on us. The new projects with Menlo Park and Redwood City, and I don't know if that makes any difference with a grant application like that. One last question. We talked about the part of the channel that goes underground into the unincorporated area on Marsh Road as it extends toward 101. I realize that's a much newer area. What we haven't talked about and what dearly affects us, and we can't know, at least I don't think we know what it looks like, is the part of the channel between the end of Watkins and the beginning of Marsh Road. Do we know what that looks like?
We walked it last week. Looks great. It's a brand new box culvert.
Between the end of Watkins and Marsh?
Yeah.
Isn't that all underground?
Yes. But it's all built, it was built to upgraded standards. The culvert walls along Marsh Road are rocks and mortar. That's it. These are, concrete box culvert with rebar walls, divider down the middle, and a concrete top.
When was it put in?
That I don't know. 60s, 70s perhaps.
Please step up to the microphone so that all people can hear. Thank you.
It must have been put in as part of Middlefield Road.
Speak up, Steve, speak up.
Yes, it was put in as part of Middlefield Road prior to, I know it was in for at least 20 years prior to the Middlefield reconstruction that took place in 2000, 2001. So it went in, I'm thinking in the late 60s, 70s. I remember speaking with Howard Crittenden, and he told me that was right about when that happened. Somewhere in the late 60s, early 70s that was put in.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
All right, so, Mike, the way I look at this, I guess this is a fixed labor contract with a fixed price labor hour. Is that essentially the way you've structured this?
No, it's not fixed, it's a not to exceed.
Okay.
So, you know, what is shown in the contract is the consultant's estimate of hours by task.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, what we will work with them to do is to ensure that the preliminary design is completed within those estimated hours and within that fee.
Okay. And the payment schedule is going to be based on just monthly invoices of hours expended?
That's correct.
Okay, it should say that in the contract, section B under 4. Looking at the contract, it doesn't look like, you know, they're doing a design and then subsequently they're gonna complete a design and subsequently we're gonna do something construction-wise. We've had other experiences here where people have done things like locating utilities and then somebody else came along and found that there was issues, and then we want to make sure that we hold people who are doing work for us liable. So I think that this contract should have some sort of survivability clause, especially on the liabilities and the quality sections of the contract, especially since the term item here in this contract, section 5, says everything ends at the end of this contract, which is on the term. I also thought that looking at the contract, item 17, it says termination of agreement default, but then it talks about both termination for convenience as well as termination for default. So I think we should clear that up. If this is part of our standard contract, we should clear that up. And I told you I like to read contracts. I think that is essentially it with my comments. So we can clean up the contract a little bit. If it's our standard contract, we should probably, I know that we're in the process of updating that, but I'd appreciate it if we could, staff could actually, we could get these things cleaned up because I think it's important. Also, I think you mentioned on the during the discussion, you mentioned, yeah, I think it's going to be on it's going to be on the 100-year flood. You think it's going to be. I think we need to be specific. If it's going to be based on, if the design is going to be based on, the analysis is going to be based on a 100-year flood situation, we should say that. If it's not going to be that, then we should not say that. So I'd like to see that added to the specification so we're clear on what we're getting, as opposed to guessing or having a verbal promise that may or may not show up in the minutes and may or may not be binding. So I'm not really sure which it is. We kind of got inferred that it was going to be at the 100-year flood, so I assume that that's really what was bid, or that's what we think was bid. We should clarify that and make sure that's in the contract in writing, okay? As far as the specifications.
And what we can do there is, that's task 1.4 is of the scope of work. And so we can work with BKF and Biggs Cardoza to include wording that, that accurately describes what they're going to be doing.
Okay, but if it's not a 100-year flood, I think we should have somebody come back and tell us that, and we can decide whether or not we want to move forward, because we're moving forward based on the comment that it's a 100-year flood.
And I think a key thing there also is, one of the things that Ed mentioned is that, really what we're going to be looking at is this historical, and for this project, this is not a flood control project that we're going to be looking at the entire area. It's really to ensure that the replacement channel, whatever that is, has at least a hydraulic capacity greater than what is currently there. And so by doing that, you know, we know that this project will not be making anything worse than what it is.
Well, if we box it, then put a box culvert and put the bike lane on top of it, and it can't handle the capacity going through it, then we have a problem upstream, or we could have a problem with deterioration downstream once we do the construction, and we're talking several $1 million based on the July meeting. You said this could be a $3 million project.
Right, but just by the fact that it could potentially be a covered box culvert, again, you know, that the capacity of that covered box culvert can be determined. And again, it'll be sized to where it'll be, you know, greater than or equal to the existing capacity of the open channel.
All right, we just need to be clear on what we're getting, that's all. I guess that's my whole point. If it's not gonna be that, then that's okay too, we just need to understand.
Then, Mr. Mayor, we need to remember, we have a scope of work that was prepared in response to an RFP that I believe the city council saw. Now, the problem is their scope of work is what we are held to and limited to. We cannot now change it. You can reject their plan and say, we're not going to end up with a contract with you, but this is the scope that we've been handed. Now, it does make some language about historic flows and flow rates. I'm sure that Mike can talk to the contractor and say, looking at historic would sort of beg the question about the 100-year flow. And since it's a design, they're certainly going to have to look at designs for several options. But we need to be careful because this contract was also the typical contract that the city council approved and sent out with the RFP. And I don't mind looking at it, but the problem is this went out to the contractor, and now we sort of have the cart and horse. At the 11th and a half hour, it's a little difficult in a meeting for me to revise a contract going forward. I can revise it tomorrow, but they've already signed it, and if, you know, they don't have to agree to it. And if we change something that affects them monetarily, I would be a little surprised if they would continue to sign it without some kind of quid pro quo back to them. So,
okay. I think that's a valid point. I don't think that my comments on it would be something that they would back away from. They have to evaluate that. And I was just reacting to the 100-year flood comment, which was made by the principal of the firm. So I just would like to have it clear.
Yeah, I think he made it clear that it was his assumption, but he wasn't sure.
Right, so we get it clear.
And I think that you're entitled to know what you're doing. I agree with that.
Right.
The survivability issue, it's one that's not too common in public works contracts and I have to go back and look at the public contracts code to see if there's a problem with it. I don't have a problem with it in concept, but I want to make sure that we're not doing something that's not legal, and could in fact affect their insurance. And therein is the cost factor that, you know, we can't expect them after the fact to face a new cost.
Okay, no problem. So if you can't update it in this, I hope that our standard contract would be updated with this, because this is not the first time. I realize that there was another city attorney where we've talked about survivability, but we'd like to actually get these things fixed because we've run into these problems before. And, you know, then we had protracted discussions that are still going on with regards to keeping ourselves whole.
Right. I will certainly do something to
you.
This contract,
Appreciate
to the standard contract.
Thank you.
Through the chair, not to belabor or extend the conversation.
We've already gone over the 45 minutes.
Oh, okay, so he's lost his bet. This is not gonna be the shortest meeting. He's not gonna, you're still number one.
I'm still the,
He's not, so, no,
I've still held the most efficient council meeting.
Kathy wasn't here, that's no fair.
Oh, so I just want, I responding to something that our Public Works Director said about making it greater, the same or greater capacity as it is now. I think that it's a very delicate fit, because you don't want to make the channel bigger than it is now to hold more flow, because then it's got to go into the Menlo Park tunnel under, you know, so I don't know, that's just kind of how my mind is working, and maybe I'm wrong about that, but I think it's got to be carefully, you know, engineered, obviously. And then my other comment is about aesthetics, and when we talk just about an exposed box culvert, if it's going to be exposed and not covered, you know, that's something else that is there a way to make it look nice? Because it looks nice the way it is now with the way it's old-fashioned, I think, but
Weeds
it's.
are covered.
Well, you know, they're
Beauty is in the
cleaning
eye of
those.
the beholder.
It
Okay.
is.
Weed.
They're cleaning it out. They're doing a lot of weeding and stuff there. You want to make a comment about that?
Well, there are a lot of things that you can incorporate fairly cheaply to existing designs with regards to aesthetics. There's texture, there's color, there's things like that. And we've done hundreds of projects that have actually won awards in channel projects that have done that. The main concern is that it doesn't affect the flow. So
Right.
whatever we have to do should not affect the flow. And the evaluation that ECAF will perform with regards to the channel and its historical, what I had previously said, that we were going to try to maintain the historical or make better the historical flows in this channel. They're also going to be looking at what the flows are coming in and what the flows are going out. So
Okay.
to belay your concerns.
That's just, yeah, thank you.
And we can incorporate also with whatever you want, whatever you put on top of the box or the,
If that ever happens.
well, you know, railings and things like that.
Oh,
You need to add some aesthetic.
okay.
Besides chain link.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Right.
Well, we have box culverts in West Atherton now in that area.
Yeah.
You wouldn't even know they're there.
Mhm. All right, I'm
Any
done.
other,
I'm
any other
ready to-
council
I'm ready to
comments
vote.
before we go? No, we haven't taken public comments,
Oh.
but I'm not sure if the council has exhausted all of their questions.
It certainly exhausted all of mine.
Lou?
Lou Paponis, 96 McBain Avenue. I have a concern, and I'm wondering if we're being a little short-sighted in not including the foundation in our expense. If I understood Steve correctly, he said that that was checked some 25 years ago. Since that time, we had the '89 earthquake that may have affected that. Eventually, as we